My hands were steady. That surprised me, actually. I'd expected them to shake. But I just reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and set it on the table without a word. My son-in-law looked at it the way you look at something you're not sure is dangerous yet. He should have been sure. I want to tell you how it started, because it didn't start at the rehearsal dinner. It didn't start the night he called me a fraud in front of 62 people who had flown in from across the country to celebrate my daughter's wedding. It started, I think, the first evening she brought him home. A Tuesday in late October, 3 years ago, when the leaves on the maples along our street had gone that deep red that only happens in Ontario when the season is turning hard. My daughter, I'll call her my daughter, because that's what she is and that's all that matters. She called ahead to say she was bringing someone. I'd made a pot of chili, nothing fancy. I'm a widower, have been for 11 years, and I learned to cook out of necessity, not passion. The chili was decent. I had cornbread from the bakery on Elgin Street. He walked in behind her, and my first impression was that he filled the doorway the way men do when they've spent a long time being told they're impressive. Tall, good-looking in an obvious way. He had on a wool overcoat that probably cost more than my first car. "Dad, this is Spencer," my daughter said. She was glowing the way she used to glow as a little girl on Christmas morning, and that alone made me want to like him. I put out my hand. "Good to meet you, Spencer. I'm Hugh." He shook it. Firm grip, the kind men practice. He looked around the living room. Just a flicker, the way you scan a hotel room when you check in and decide whether it's up to standard. I noticed. I didn't say anything. We sat down to eat. Spencer was charming over dinner. He talked about his work at a commercial real estate development firm downtown. They were involved in a mixed-use project near the distillery district, he said, and a waterfront proposal that was getting some attention from city council. He used words like leverage and deliverables and value add the way some people use salt, on everything without thinking. My daughter looked at him adoringly. I focused on my chili. "What do you do, Hugh?" he asked me. "Somewhere between the first bowl and the second." "I'm retired," I said. "From construction, mostly." He nodded in a way that closed the subject. Not rude, exactly. Just finished. The way you nod when someone tells you they drove a bus for 30 years. Polite acknowledgement, nothing more. My daughter changed the subject. I let her. Over the following 2 years, I watched Spencer the way you watch weather coming in off the lake. You don't panic. You just note the pressure dropping and make sure you know where your coat is. He was good to my daughter. I want to be clear about that, because it matters, and because I'm not the kind of man who looks for reasons to dislike someone. He took her to dinner. He was attentive. He remembered her preferences. On the surface, he was everything you'd want for your child. But there were moments. The time they came for Thanksgiving, my son drove up from Hamilton with his family, and Spencer spent most of dinner explaining to my son why the trades were a dead end and automation was going to eliminate most manual labor jobs within a decade. My son is a licensed electrician. He's been one for 22 years. He listened and smiled and didn't say much. And afterward, in the kitchen, he said to me quietly, "Where does your daughter find these guys?" I didn't have a good answer. There was the time Spencer mentioned while we were watching the Leafs game that he found hockey a bit provincial. He was from British Columbia originally, which he brought up often, as if Ontario were a place one ended up rather than a place one chose. There was the time my daughter mentioned I'd worked on some projects up north in the 90s, and Spencer asked, with genuine puzzlement, "Just laboring, or were you in a supervisory role?" "Both," I said. He nodded. That same nod. "I'm 67 years old. I have been working since I was 15. I spent 20 years swinging a hammer before I picked up a pen. But I learned a long time ago that the people most eager to establish your rank in the first 5 minutes of conversation are usually the most anxious about their own. So I let Spencer talk. I let him explain things to me. I let him assume. It costs me nothing to be underestimated. I've built a career on it. They got engaged in February. My daughter called me from a restaurant in Montreal, crying the good kind of tears, and I sat in my kitchen and felt that complicated thing parents feel, joy for your child, and the quiet, helpless awareness that joy and worry are never really separate when it comes to the people you love. The wedding was set for the following September. My daughter handled most of the planning. Spencer's parents contributed what they could. His father is a retired school teacher, lovely man, and his mother volunteers at a library in Kelowna. Salt of the earth, both of them. I liked them the moment I met them at the engagement dinner. I offered to cover the venue. My daughter protested, the way she always protests when I offer things, but I told her it was what I wanted and I meant it. The venue was the Ashwood Inn, a heritage property about 40 minutes west of the city. 300 acres, a restored Victorian manor house, barns that had been converted into event spaces, gardens along the river. It had been operating for about 6 years. The previous owners had run into financial trouble. I'd come in during the restructuring, which is a longer story. I didn't bring it up. I just made a call, arranged everything, and told my daughter she should focus on enjoying her engagement. She cried again. Good tears. Spencer said it was a beautiful gesture. He had no way of knowing it was anything more than that. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday evening in the East Barn, which they dressed with candles and white linen and late summer flowers from the garden. 62 guests, both families, close friends, the wedding party. My daughter looked the way mothers hope their daughters will look someday, settled, radiant, certain. I was sitting at the far end of the head table, beside Spencer's uncle from Abbotsford, a quiet man who liked fishing and didn't feel the need to fill silence with opinions. We got along fine. Spencer had been drinking since the afternoon. Not sloppily, he held it well. But I noticed, his voice had taken on that particular confidence that alcohol lends to men who already have too much of it. He stood up to give a toast around 8:30. He thanked his parents. He thanked the wedding party. He said something charming about my daughter that made people laugh and then tear up, which is the mark of a good toast. And then he looked down the table at me. And to my father-in-law, he said, raising his glass. Hugh, a simple man in the best sense of the word. A man who worked with his hands his whole life and never asked for more than that. Humble, modest, content. He smiled. It takes a certain kind of person to know their place in this world and stay in it. I admire that, I genuinely do. There was a ripple of uncertain applause. A few people smiled, not entirely sure what they'd just heard. My daughter's smile had gone tight at the edges. Spencer wasn't finished. Honestly, when Eleanor first told me about her father, I wasn't sure what to make of him. A contractor, retired, living in the house he's lived in for 30 years. He laughed a little. But you know what? There's something to be said for a man who finds his lane and stays in it. Spencer raised his glass higher, to Hugh, a working man. The applause was quieter this time. Spencer's father, across the table, was looking at his plate. My daughter said quietly, Spencer, I mean it as a compliment, he said. I really do. Not everyone can be ambitious. Not everyone should be. The world needs people who know their limits. I set down my fork. I looked at Spencer for a moment. He met my eyes, still smiling, very sure of himself. I picked up my glass. Thank you, Spencer, I said. That means a great deal. I drank. I said nothing else. My daughter reached under the table and put her hand on my arm. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from anger. I'm past the age where anger keeps me up. It was something else. A kind of clarity that comes when you realize a situation has resolved itself into something simple. My daughter found me at breakfast in the manor house dining room, early, before anyone else was up. She sat across from me with her coffee, and she looked like she hadn't slept either. Dad, I'm so sorry. Don't be, I said. He had too much to drink. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed. It isn't. She was quiet for a moment. He does this. He doesn't realize he does it, but he talks about people like they're categories. Not people, categories. I looked at my daughter. She was 34 years old, and she had her mother's eyes, and she'd been making her own decisions since she was 19. I was not going to tell her what to do with her marriage. I know, I said. Eat your breakfast. Dad, the wedding is in 7 hours, I said. And you've spent a lot of time planning it, and I want you to enjoy every minute of it. So eat your breakfast. She looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was 12, and she'd caught me being deliberately calm about something that probably shouldn't have been calm about. Then she picked up her fork. I went back to my room and made 2 phone calls. The wedding ceremony was at noon, in the gardens, beside the river. My daughter was breathtaking. Spencer cried when he saw her walking toward him, and I'll give him that. Those were real tears, and they were for her. Whatever else he was, he loved my daughter. I held on to that. I walked her down the aisle. She held my arm the way she used to hold my hand when she was small, tight, like she wasn't sure of the ground, but she was sure of me. I got her to the end of the aisle and I put her hand in Spencer's, and I sat down in the front row and I was fine right up until I wasn't, which was exactly what I expected. The reception was in the main barn. Dinner, dancing, speeches. Spencer's best friend from university gave a toast that went on longer than it should have but was genuinely funny. My son gave a speech about his sister that made half the room cry. Then it was my turn. I'm not a natural public speaker. Never have been. I spent most of my career in trailers and boardrooms and on job sites, not behind a podium. But I've had to speak at enough project completions and investor meetings over the years that I know how to hold a room. I stood up, I thanked everyone for coming. I said some things about my daughter that I meant completely and will not repeat here because they're hers. Then I paused. Many of you were at the rehearsal dinner last night, I said. Spencer raised a very kind toast to me. He called me a simple man who knows his place in this world. I smiled. I've been thinking about that all day. The room was quiet. Spencer was watching me from the head table. I started in this industry when I was 19 years old, I said, laboring on a commercial build in Scarborough, making $8 an hour. I worked every trade I could learn. Framing, concrete, finish. I got my ticket, then I got my foreman papers, then I started taking on small contracts of my own. I paused. That was 48 years ago. I reached into my jacket and unfolded the sheet of paper I'd been carrying all day. I smoothed it on the table in front of me. This property, I said, the Ashwood Inn and its grounds. I've held the controlling interest since 2019. Before that, I was involved in the financing of the original restoration through a numbered company. I looked up. The Ashwood has been in my portfolio for 6 years. My daughter didn't know that. Spencer had gone very still. The building Spencer's firm operates out of, the one on King Street, the Belmore Tower. I've held a 40% stake in the ownership group since 2014. I set the paper down. Spencer works in my building. I've known that for about 18 months. Absolute silence in the barn. I'm also, as of this past spring, one of 3 investors in the waterfront development proposal. Spencer mentioned to me at our first dinner. I came in quietly, as I usually do. The lead developer knows me. Spencer's managing director knows me. I folded the paper. Spencer does not know me. I looked at my son-in-law. He was white. His best man had a hand on his arm without seeming to realize it. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone, I said. I'm saying it because my daughter is marrying a man who believes he understands what other people are worth. And I want him to understand, with great respect, and with the full hope that I am wrong about him. That worth is not something you can read in a man's jacket, or his job title, or the truck he drives. I lifted my glass. Spencer, you said I know my place in this world. You're right. I built my place in this world from the ground up for 48 years and I know every nail in it. I looked at my daughter, and the best thing in it is her. Treat her accordingly. I sat down. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Nothing happened. Then my son started clapping. Then Spencer's father. Then the room. Spencer did not clap. Spencer sat very still with a fixed expression that I recognized as a man recalibrating everything he thought he knew. The days after the wedding were complicated. My daughter called me on the Monday, the morning after they'd flown out for their honeymoon in Costa Rica. She had clearly been processing. Dad, the Belmore Tower? Yes. Since 2014? Since 2014. A long pause. Why didn't you ever tell me? You never asked what buildings I owned. Another pause. Fair Eleanor, I said. I don't talk about money because money isn't interesting. What I do with it sometimes is, but the money itself isn't. Spencer is. She stopped, started again. He's embarrassed. He should be, I said. But not because of the money. Because of what he said. I know. Does he know that? A longer silence. He's working on it. That was all I needed to hear. Not that Spencer was sorry. Sorry is easy. That he was working on it. Working suggests intent. I'm a builder. I understand the difference between a foundation and a finished floor. What happened in the weeks that followed, I was not responsible for, or not entirely. The waterfront development story broke in a trade publication in early October, and a journalist doing background research on the investor group called Spencer's managing director for comment. And in the course of that conversations, it came out that one of the major private investors had been at the project lead's table at a wedding reception the previous month, and the managing director, who had in fact been a guest at my daughter's wedding, apparently shared the story over lunch with a colleague, and these things have a way of traveling in the industry. Spencer was not fired. I want to be clear about that. He was never in any danger of being fired. What happened was more uncomfortable than that. His colleagues knew. His managing director knew. The people he'd been performing competence for 3 years, now had a very specific piece of information about what he'd said and done, and assumed, and they had drawn their own conclusions. Spencer requested a meeting with me in November. He drove out to my house on a Saturday, by himself, and sat across from me, at the same kitchen table where I'd served him chili 2 years before. He didn't have a speech prepared, which I respected. "I treated you badly," he said. "From the beginning, I think." "Yes," I said. "You did. I didn't know." "Spencer," I said it quietly, "I need you to hear something, and I need you to hear it correctly. What you did wrong had nothing to do with not knowing. Do you understand what I'm saying?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yes, the wrong was the assumption," I said, "not the information gap." He nodded. This was a different kind of nod than the ones I'd seen before. This one had weight in it. We talked for an hour and a half. About my daughter. About what she needed in a partner. About what I'd learned in 48 years about the difference between confidence and arrogance, and how the gap between them is exactly one catastrophic moment in a barn in front of 140 guests. He drove home. I made coffee and sat by the window and watched the first snow of the season come down on the maples. My daughter and Spencer will be fine. I believe that. Not because Spencer is fixed. People aren't cars. You don't fix them. They fix themselves or they don't. But because my daughter is who she is, and she will not accept being loved carelessly, and she has made that clear to him in ways that are between the two of them. She calls me on Sundays. We talk about nothing in particular. Hockey, what she's cooking, how her garden did this year, whether I'm eating properly. Last Sunday, she mentioned that Spencer had asked to come with her to my place for Christmas dinner. She asked if that was all right with me. I told her to make sure he's hungry. I make a good chili. What I didn't tell her, what I probably never will, is that the folded paper I put on the table during my wedding speech was not a financial document. It wasn't a deed of ownership or a portfolio summary or a shareholder agreement. It was a recipe, an old one, written in my wife's handwriting that I've carried in my jacket pocket since she died. I've never needed a document to know what I own.